Welcome to the Identifying Successful Starts Methodologies exhibition, project and artist-scientist roundtable. The research project began in 2019, a collaboration between the Starts Prize, Ars Electronica and the University of Wolverhampton in the UK. The threats of the COVID crisis have also brought about new opportunities, such as participating in a distributed Ars Electronica festival this year, and has prompted us to host our project exhibition early in order to showcase the work of the project alongside some of the winners and honorary mentions of the Starts Prize. The exhibition includes Julia Tomasello's project Future Flora and Jen Keen's This Is Grown. Future Flora was the winner of the 2018 Starts Prize for Artistic Exploration and is a project celebrating and embracing women's bodies. Using wearable technologies, it is a harvesting kit designed for women who are taking control of their own bodies as a precious and intimate practice of self-care. From this year's Starts Prize in 2020, we were keen to host the work of Taiwanese artist Pei Ying Lin, given the immense global impact that COVID-19 is having. Her project, Virophilia, investigates the possibilities of human virus encounters. One part of the installation is a 7-metre-high scroll that lists all known viruses in the world, with space for more to be added. Also installed are the printed pages from Pei's Virophilia cookbook, written for humans living in the 22nd century, when the world has returned to considering human beings as part of a greater ecosystem. Recipes for dishes such as temporal cocktail and influenza egg on rice offer a playful view of our human virus futures. During our research project, we have focused on identifying the collaborative methodologies that are common in Starts projects, having undertaken over 20 interviews with artists and scientists, which have resulted in a series of case studies of projects from the last 4 years of the prize. A number of the artists and scientists describe how they have to build a third space in order for them to find a common language together. Through the case studies undertaken, there appears to be an emergence of antidisciplinary practices that do not fit within existing academic disciplines. And finally, if art, science and technology embrace different ways of knowing, this can lead to greater insights for the challenges of the contemporary world. Today we've brought together 3 sets of collaborators from projects that have been recognised by the prize. These are Library of Ourselves by Be Another Lab, Future Flora by Julia Tomasello, and Virophilia by Pei Ying Lin. In this artist-scientist roundtable entitled Mapping Collaborative Practice, we asked the presenters to reflect upon moments of uncertainty when working across the arts and science. I hand you over now to Dr. Richard Glover and Dr. Martin Kashara, who are facilitators of this session.
Hello, welcome to the roundtable discussion with participants from 3 of the projects in our Starts Methodologies exhibition at the University of Wolverhampton. My name is Richard Glover. I'm a reader in music here at the university, working in composition and how different processes can be experienced through performing music. I'm co-hosting this roundtable with Martin Kashara. Martin?
Hello, yes, I'm Martin Kashara, and I'm an Associate Professor for Engagement in STEM, and I'll be your other host for this Artist and Scientist Roundtable today, along with Richard. And I think we're going to have some fantastic discussions around the collaborations that we've seen as part of our projects between scientists, technologists, and artists that have been part of the projects we've had today.
Thanks, Martin. So, to give you an idea of the structure of this roundtable, we'll be hearing presentations on each of the 3 projects first, followed by individual discussions on each project before opening up for wider discussion. So, we'll begin with a presentation by Julia Tomasello on the Alma project, which is a follow-on project from Future Flora.
Hello, everyone. I'm Giulia Tomasello. I'm an interaction designer. I'm Italian, but recently based between Berlin and Italy. And in the talk, there is also Tommaso Busolo, the material scientist and tech part of the project that we are going to introduce you now. And the project is called Alma. So when I started to work in this field as an interaction designer, I always thought that there is the best introduction for me. It's really with a sentence from Simone de Beauvoir, which says, "That's me. I have a body. I'm a woman, and my body is a social construction rather than a naturally given datum." And with this sentence, Simone de Beauvoir really wanted to say, how actually in the society female are perceived. So they are perceived as the female that actually they give birth, so the natural body, but also the female that are, they have a constructed body. So what actually the society is expecting for female. And this is something that as a designer really kind of struggled me to understand why somehow we are so surrounded by taboo. And so in my work, I really base the use of technology and biotechnology for the female intimate care. And as you can see, I'm taking inspiration from the women in Boston in 1970, where they were meeting every week to really talk about topics that they were been always considered taboo. So topics like menstruation, giving birth, birth control, or even sexual health, that most of the time have been spoken with the male doctors, and we can argue that even now those topics are considered taboo. And they were meeting really between female to try to understand how to destigmatize this taboo. And they made a book called Our Bodies, Ourselves that spread all over to really try to give education to female. So my approach as a designer started with actually growing bacteria. So I was studying in Central St. Martin's Material Futures, and I started to grow textile on bacteria. And especially I was growing from my body, so from my vulva skin, my nose, different parts that most of the time are considered quite taboo, and see what it was growing. And then I was combining it with textile to see actually how the combination could really merge together. And then I started to think about, so actually, what if we would wear bacteria to empower female? So what actually if we see what is behind already products existing in the market, and we can try to understand that actually maybe they are made as well of bacteria as we are as well as human. So the project near, Future Flora, which is actually also an exhibition with SARS and methodology, and was also a case from Denise Doyle, is actually a kit designed for women to treat and prevent Candida infection. And it's a kit where the woman has at home a little pad made of agar-agar, where she can swab healthy bacteria on top and try to grow healthy bacteria to balance her flora. And Girl Biophilia is actually a documentary that we produced in 2017, and it really kind of speaks loud on how female could try to actually embrace biotechnology at home. And I talk about this innovation as about time, because at the beginning has been perceived very provocative, this project, but actually in 2018, it received the STARS Prize from Ars Electronica as an honor and innovation in science society for the arts. And so it completely changed the vision, which actually is not anymore something that we perceive far, but why not that one day we will have an incubator at home, we know how to grow bacteria, and we as female, we can take care of our own body. So then from Future Flora, we moved on to Alma. And Alma is a wearable biosensor for monitoring vaginal fluids. And at the moment, actually until 2 days ago, it has been funded from Reframe, which is another Horizon 2020 European funding that really gave us the opportunity to push forward this project. And we had a technical support, which was Fraunhofer in IZM in Berlin. So Tommaso, maybe now you can introduce better the product.
Hi everyone. As Julia said, I'm Tomasello. I'm the material scientist. And here I'm going to tell you a bit more about the Alma project, and particularly why we build, where we're building this, and what have we built so far. So first, we kind of want to focus on vaginal infections because 75% of women suffer of one of these infections in their lifetime, and 8% of women suffer from recurrent forms of infections. So this is something that is clearly a problem, but is not really much talked about because of the taboo and the stigma around this. So we decided to combine Julia's expertise in design and my technical background to produce a pH sensor to measure the pH in vaginal fluids. This is was done in collaboration with Fraunhofer, and here you can see us working in the lab or working remotely, where I'm based in Cambridge. I'm a PhD student there, and I was kind of like helping out all the chemistry work. This has been a very successful project because we built an underwear that has an embedded pH sensor that is able to record data and wirelessly transmit it to the user's phone so that female can be informed about their vaginal health on a continuous method.
So, and actually the picture you saw before is actually the last prototypes that we have been producing and that we will show more during the Ars Electronica Festival, because we will have actually our final presentation of Reframe. And this is just a little like a peek of how it was our approach. So it was really dictated by a user experience approach and a co-design and participatory design. And we really like dive through like what is actually mean to talk about intimate healthcare. So we have been running so far from the beginning of Reframe in October, different workshops from also different parts of the world because of the nature of my work that I was quite nomad. So we started with a workshop in Rio de Janeiro, then in Milan, Bangkok, Malaysia, in Penang, and then Basel, to really try also to understand how female from different cultures and different also ages, but different backgrounds can really talk about intimate care, and if we do. And as you can expect, like the majority actually, we don't talk because it's still really a taboo, but actually when you put female together, it's when the sparkling starts, because actually we want to talk about and we want to have an understanding of what is happening. So Alma Meets Flora is actually the title of this workshop, that also is a survey that you can find online. And it's called Alma Meets Flora because it looks like kind of two girls meeting up, but actually it's Alma the sensor meeting the vaginal flora. We are still running workshops and surveys, so please, if you're interested to actually like help us to design this future of this underwear, support us and go on my website and actually apply for the survey. And this is who we are, like it's a very big team so far, and we really like remotely we managed to work, and it's the best part. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Julia. Thank you for that presentation. Okay, I think we're now moving on to the Be Another Lab presentation for Library of Ourselves.
So hello, my name is Christian. So thank you very much for having us on the panel here. I'm looking forward to exchanging perspectives with everybody. So beforehand, I'll just give a little brief introduction to some of the work we've been doing, particularly around this broader project called Library of Ourselves. So we've been active since 2012. There's about 8 different members of the team spread about in different countries. We come from very different disciplinary contexts, from computer science, from conflict resolution, from social anthropology, cognitive science. And really what we've been working on is on the notion of embodiment, and trying to create interfaces and protocols for altering your sense of self, your sense of embodiment and what your body is, and looking into the possibilities of sharing experiences with others and inhabiting other sorts of realities and perspectives. So there's a physical component of this, which is, as you can see here, there's 2 users exchanging perspectives with real-time feedback, let's say tactile feedback. to kind of hack that bodily perception. On top of this bottom-up layer, let's say, we also have, I guess, a top-down layer that aids in this body transfer illusion of narrative as well. So it's not just about inhabiting a body, but about how that body, who that is situated in a particular context, and what their story might be. So our way of generating or approaching this this project has been very collaborative in nature. Usually in each context that we work in, we start from the ground up in terms of clearly kind of isolating and talking through what the goals are of the project, what the expectations are, what the risks are, and trying to use the methodologies more of like from an artistic background, let's say, that allow for a different hierarchical nature, different power structure in the generation of the projects that we do. So these are, while the projects might be similar, let's say from one context to the next, they are very much determined by the local context, by our collaborators from different communities, from different institutional partners, about what the needs and particularities are of engaging in that context. So it's really a hyper-local formulation of the project in each context that it goes. So while we did a lot of stuff which was very much real-time and performative, we also were working with immersive video and using some of the same immersive theater protocols to create this physical illusion of being in the body of another person. And with that, then we used, or we approached it as a way of telling different stories also. So as you can see, if you just go back a couple of slides, there you go. So here you'll see that there's a user and there's a facilitator facilitating the experience. If you see just on the screen there, it's quite small on the bottom, it's the next slide as well. What they're seeing is this. So this is a video that we filmed with Joe, who's a trans man, and talks about their transition, their embodied identity, reflecting that, how they feel in public space, in the home, relations, and so forth. And it's a way of stepping into what their experience might be. So with each particular project, there's been different goals about what they've been targeted for. If you go to the next one, this was a collaboration that we did with Muslim teenagers in Barcelona, looking at trying to reflect their lived experience. In this case, it was more theatrical reconstructions of things that had happened to them in public spaces, in schools, and job interviews, of discrimination that they had faced. And what their idea was to use this material to create some public interventions around it as well. So we took the setup to the street, did different, gathered people, oh, come try VR, not telling them what it was about, having them step into these experiences. And then afterwards, the people who had created the experiences would appear and have a chat with them and say, well, have you ever experienced this? Have you seen this happen? Do you know how to behave when this happens? And really using it as a possible intervention to generate these kinds of conversations. If you go to the next slide, that's also from that same project. There's another slide there. If you go to the next one as well, this was in Argentina, working with people from the refugee community there. You can go to the next slide also. This is again more of one of these reconstructed ones. We were working in an event that was, I suppose, like a hackathon around the peace initiative in Colombia. And so what we created here was a collection of different people's experiences that they sort of constructed into a common narrative around the notion of violence, forgiveness, and in this case, you take the point of view of the aggressor, starting from their childhood up until a scene of a kidnapping, and then you meet the person that you've kidnapped later. It's the sister of your partner at the time. There's a narrative to these things, and it's all really about forgiveness. So in each of these cases, none of these things would have been narratives that we would have been able to come up with on our own if we tried to go in there and impose a particular view of what should have happened, but rather they emerged from this collaborative quite horizontal process of narrative construction and utilizing the technology for this. Now, each of these different projects also offer up opportunities for let's say, analysis or research around these issues, around people's public perceptions of them, around the effectiveness of these interventions for generating different empathic or responses, or perspective taking. And so we've been involved a lot in a lot of that as well. So different members of the team have been actively embedded in research institutions, doing more formalized work and reformulating some of the these more public experiments, more social experiments into lab contexts as well. If you go to the next slide. There's just the scene from the kidnapping thing here. And it's interesting to think about the notion of agency, I think. Like in this case, the user is the interaction design, let's say, is to talk about that a little bit. The user, in order to be able to have the physical experience of being in the body of the other person, can only imitate the movements that they're seeing in the video, which is different than the real-time setup that we have of swapping bodies. So the notion of agency is that they have less agency. So in this case, having to put the tape over the person's mouth, most of the users that we've talked to afterwards said, I really did not, like, I did not want to do that at all. Like, this is the last thing I wanted to do. It was really quite a jarring emotional experience. But feeling like the desire to not want to do something and still having to do it allowed them to empathize with the person's perspective of also being in that situation, maybe participating in an act of aggression, not wanting to do it, but feeling compelled to, feeling pressure that there was really no escape and having to participate in that. So it's very interesting how the notion of agency also translates into like an affordance, let's say, of a particular interactive system can allow for different kinds of perspectives into individual experiences, which have nothing to do with technology. If we go to the next slide. This is, again, another project that we did in community gypsy, looking at lived experiences there. So each of these places are places where we've been invited to go. We don't necessarily seek them out. There's usually an embedded person within an institution, within a community that is interested in collaborating with us. And that's what helps us facilitate this work. I think I might stop there and see if Norma wants to add anything.
Yeah, maybe just briefly. I guess I'm a hybrid myself in this collective. So Being at the Lab really started in 2013, and everybody has an interdisciplinary background. But I first started collaborating with the team as an anthropologist. So I was doing my PhD research with them, and in this process, I became a member of the lab as well. So and now I'm kind of having to think what is the epistemology of my own knowledge production, being a member of the team, at the same time learn what kind of research do I do with the collective. And I think, yeah, it's posing some interesting questions of how collaborative knowledge production can work, and also how it works in the kind of under the umbrella of art, and then being based at the university, so having a way more formal context, and then which kind of constraints I have in my participation here. But yeah, I would also like to discuss that in more detail later, maybe.
Okay, thank you so much, Christian and Norma, much appreciated. So we'll turn finally to the project Virophilia, which is led by Pei Ying Lin with Miranda de Graaf as well.
Yes, so hello everyone. I'm Pei Ying Lin. I'm from Taiwan, but currently reside in the Netherlands, and with my collaborator Miranda de Graaf. Yeah, so I'll start with the concept. So I have a series of projects that's surrounding the topic of viruses. And it was during my collaboration with Miranda that she introduced me this idea of virusphere. So the virusphere is all those places where viruses are found or which they interact with their hosts. We are probably already very familiar with the idea of biosphere, where it consists of all the living beings. But then viruses are a little bit odd, like they're considered in biology that they're not alive, but at the same time, they are alive and replicating on other living beings. And that creates a very interesting area which, yes, please, next slide, which it was the starting point of my collaboration with Miranda, which is the project Aims to Tame. And I was suggesting that we perhaps can tame the viruses. But before I start with the project itself, I'll leave it to Miranda to talk about the virus we were dealing with.
Yeah, so to first introduce the virus that we work with, which is Norovirus. So Norovirus is a huge diversity. So on the right, you see a phylogenetic tree representing the diversity of viruses that we have for Norovirus. And what you can see is that not only is there a lot of diversity, it also infects a lot of different human and animal species. And actually each species has its own type of Norovirus. So in humans, 80% of all infections is only caused by one type. But what we see during time is that we see novel variants emerging. And the process behind this really is part of my research questions that I have. So next slide, please. So my work group mainly works on these questions. So where do these new viruses come from? And where do they originate? And what are the mechanisms behind this process? So we have some theories that either they emerge in humans that we don't test for norovirus, or perhaps they emerge in immunocompromised patients because they can be infected with norovirus for many months. Or it can also happen that these viruses emerge in the animal population and then go to humans. Next slide.
Yes, so Miranda mentioned this really interesting thing that I never thought of, is that there's no vaccine available for norovirus so far. And then I think a lot of the people have been infected by norovirus probably at least once in your lifetime, because it causes you puke and diarrhea, and you feel like you are almost dying when you're puking. Well, so it becomes interesting. If we don't have the vaccine for it, that means we cannot protect ourselves from it. So we are always vulnerable towards them. Then is it possible that we can live with them? And so we start with this concept of having virus tamers. These tamers are trying to live with the viruses. And so the next slide, which we can see in the manifesto, we ask the tamers to think about 5 important questions to define ourselves. So we need to think of whether humans are a part of nature or not. And we need to think about viruses. Are they just like another wild animals, or are they our enemies? And also we need to think about individual human, or do we think about the others, like our species, more when we make decisions? And also the final one is, do we think ourselves as the habitant of the viruses, or they are living on us and they are our parasite? And by changing all this concept, could we possibly become more friendly towards them and live with them? So what you see in the picture right now is a plushy doll that you can actually try to hug. It is on the shape of a norovirus. It's not exactly one-to-one, but the geometric shape is the same. And then the next slide. We also have this question of, if we have different affinity with the viruses, like what Miranda was talking about earlier, there are different strains of the norovirus. And if I got infected with a certain strain, then I will have immunity towards it, and that's the only way we can. Then does that immunity define ourselves and also change our behavior? So the next slide, you can see this is the array that we did our blood test on, and to see my reaction, my antibody reactions towards the norovirus and Miranda's. And Miranda will talk about the detail how it works.
So what we see here on top is the genetic material of norovirus, and the genetic material encodes several proteins. And what we do is we express those proteins, and we don't do it for one type of norovirus, but we do it for all the types of norovirus. And we print these on small glass slides. And these glass slides we can incubate with serum, just like me and Pei did. And by doing this, you can see which viruses are recognized. So you can see which viruses you were probably infected by.
Yeah, so we create a profile of ourselves, and so we can see that what kind of immunity we have towards it. And then it turns out I have reacted and encountered a bit more viruses before. So this profile actually suggests us to behave differently as a tamer. So the next slide. The squirrels are the 2 years history of our routes of traveling, like where we've been on Earth, and also the time of our sickness. So we will know that we actually came across the path of the virus at a certain time. And that makes me become the virus tamers who want to encounter more viruses all the time to gain immunity. So as long as I get the immunity, that I can deliver the resources or take care of people when they get sick. When Miranda, she's in the lab all the time with norovirus, and she has to protect herself. So she has to regulate her movements all the time to make sure that she's not encountering the viruses. So the next slide. For some tamers, if they want to go my route and to get sick all the time, then you have to be mentally prepared. So this is a tea that makes the tamers to drink so you can have puke and diarrhea. And once you get used to that physical experience, then you don't get panic when you get sick. And the next one. There is also this movement exercise that the tamers can do. So you get a better control of your body, and also you get more used to cuff on your arms if it's required, because that physicality is not that common before COVID-19, probably more common now. And you always hold your hands so you don't touch whatever. These kind of exercises. And the next one. We also do the exploration of a dance to see what our movement will change once we take this concept of taming the virus, encountering the virus all the time. Will us move differently in the space. And next one. And there's also this board game where you can impersonate with real biological data to play different characters with different immunity and different age, so you can collaborate with each other, trying to make sure that the viruses don't die out completely, but at the same time don't harm the vulnerable people. And this one leads to the next project, which is virophilia. It's the one that is showing this time. So virophilia comes after the question, after this tea for puke and diarrhea, that I was questioning how close can we get with the viruses, and also can these physical reactions create something beneficial for us. So the next one. The virophilia sometimes exists as a performance and sometimes as an installation. And what you see here is a scroll. It has all the names of viruses that we know so far, but it's only the master list. So there are still some other names in there, like, for example, the one called COVID-19 is not on there. It's increasing massively every year. And then the cookbook. So the cookbook is written in the year of 2068. I wrote it like 2 years ago, but the concept that is written in the future, but looking back at now and see how we can develop our history as a collaboration with the viruses later on, which you can see in the chapters. Like it starts with simulating the viral experiences, like simulating how they make us sick, and then starting with using viruses like bacteria for fermentation to change the texture and taste of plants or other food material which was once living. And then the third chapter is using viruses as active ingredients, like something makes your throat hurt as a part of the dining experience. And then chapter 4, dynamic cuisine, which is using the viruses to control the change of taste and change of a whole microbe system when you're fermenting. And the last chapter is cuisines that designed for everybody that's in a food chain. So it's a dinner, but it's the dinner that's for everybody involved. And the next page. So this is a simulation of influenza. And the next page. This is another simulation for norovirus, which if you eat the oyster, it will make you puke, diarrhea. Yeah. And the next one, this is the snapshot of the viral fermentation. And next one, this is an influenza egg on rice, which when you eat the raw egg, it creates a slight sensation of sickness with your throat and slightly higher temperature. And the next one. So it also exists in a video format where you will see a person eating the virus's dish, and then with a text indicating how virus is interacting with her body at that moment. And then the next. So during the dinner performance, people are served with these food. I will guide them by letting them listening to how the virus is entering through the food into their body, and to create the sensation of viruses in contact with the human body. And the next one, which we also did it back in June, when during the quarantine, that the food are delivered through food delivery at home, and I perform through the internet, so they can experience how the viruses interact with their body while there's viruses outside. And that was done in Taiwan. So this is pretty much the project. I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Thank you so much, Pei Ying and Miranda, for that. And to all of you, really fascinating insights into the project with a lot of detail there. So absolutely wonderful to see the variety of thought that's gone into that, and also how the lines of thought have fed into what we see as the sort of final outcomes on the STARTS project website. I'll just briefly say that our project here at Wolverhampton, as part of the STARTS methodologies team, is focusing on those different methods of working, the different ways of working that collaborators from different backgrounds use in order to successfully pull off a project, and how their different backgrounds impact upon the pathways and the processes that are taken. So if we come back to Julia and Tomasello to talk about Future Flora and Alma, I'll sort of group those two together. But I know, Tomasello, you've been more involved in Alma, I think that's right. So I'll just start with a broader question, because one of the things that we found in our research, collaborators often put a lot of significance on the importance of meeting on a different plane together, or inhabiting something like a third space, a space that's separate to the disciplines that people bring to the table. So there is a kind of a new third space created when you work together. Is that something that you found when working together?
I will say so, yes, because actually, as you can imagine, it was not, well, actually, we kind of align like organically, but yeah, at the beginning, it was really an effort between like both of us to get closer with the language. So we really like worked on creating a bridge to really merge the scientific language with the design artistic language, and try to see how we can both speak to each other. So I was reading more scientific paper, while Tomasello was like more also like getting into the speculative design and the biohacking, even though like it's really far from what it could do in the lab. And I would say that now, like without this actually bridge that we created, we wouldn't be able to really like this and go in depth so much with Alma. And in the team now, it's really like with medical anthropologists, physicists, material scientists, biotechnologists, fashion designer, like we really open up because it's essential. So it's really essential to be an interdisciplinary group.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, Tomasello. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with Julia in terms of like, yes, we have to create a new sort of like field in terms of like where we sit, as you said, like want to join to kind of create a third layer. But I think it's like not as far from where each of us come from as you might think, because like we are comfortable with our expertise, but then obviously, as Julia said, we need to shift our mindset and our language to sort of be able to approach different people, and also to sort of like make them feel comfortable with the topics and the language that we use.
So just to explore this notion of a bridge, what are we talking about there? Are we talking about a shared language or sort of set of terms? Are we talking about a sort of framework of seeing or knowing that you can both share?
Definitely language, and then also methodology in working. So of course, like design and science has different time in work, like, but really like timetable, but also time and space. And we kind of aligned recently because of course, while sometimes like the science took more time to really like explore and validate, meanwhile I was joining in with like different methodologies now to explore, for example, the user. So I was more, if Tomasello was more technical, I was trying to be more social and from an anthropological level to merge the technology. And but then we meet in the lab, which is also very nice. So we meet in the lab with prototyping and with actually merging technology, science and fashion together, which is the most exciting part, I will say now, especially when you are in the field of like wearable technology, biotechnology for the healthcare. It's where now like you can create more interesting exploration, I would say.
I think the other sort of like from a practical point of view, it's sort of like understanding each other's mental framework in the way you do a project. So the way I'm a scientist, I kind of see the goal of the project, that's what we're trying to do, and then kind of break it down in different ways. And I generally try to keep it as linear as possible because that's the fastest way you can do something. But then in the design world, this is not necessarily the case because we might not know the ending, but the more interesting part is the question. And the question might take us in a spiral way or like from point B to F to D to and randomly. And so it's something that it took us time to understand that neither of these approaches is wrong, but we need to sort of understand where our vision, where we want to go, and then like we kind of merge our paths in a way that is efficient enough to reach our goal, but sort of like creative enough or like say open to allow us to actually reach a different goal that we didn't even know existed at the beginning.
And this idea of moving from point B to F, moving in a way that you can't predict, underlying that, there has to be quite a strong sense of trust between you, that moving in a direction that might not seem clear or obvious at the beginning is going to lead somewhere.
Yes, it's essential. I will say like it's also my first and only, no, it's not the only one now, but it's the first also work relationship I had in Italian language with Tomasello, even though most of the time we speak in English by being also both Italian, but both expat. And yeah, another interesting part is that, of course, like as a designer, I tend to be very speculative and creative and really like push it very far with vision. And Tomasello as a scientist, much more based in statistics and numbers. So it's very funny that most of the time, like I completely say something very far away, and then Tomasello is bringing me back to the present. Actually, you know, this is what is based now in research. So let's first do this, and then we move on. But it's the perfect balance because then we don't get bored, and we really like move on to explore something that yet probably doesn't exist or is not very well developed yet.
Yeah, and I mean, we've been working together for over 2 years. So it's something to say, trust is extremely important, and it's not something that we build in a month. This like has been a process, and it's sort of like, we definitely had like miscommunication. We definitely see like different like kind of sort of like misunderstandings and sort of like problems, but then like it's sort of like we really took it down to understand like our values and our vision and what we really feel like it's important, from a project level, more from like a human level of what we think is important. And I think sort of having this sort of like deep connection from like a value standpoint and like a vision standpoint really like make us overlook or overcome easily this sort of like more practical point of view of from like a bit of language or maybe like some other sort of turn in the design or the creative process.
Okay, thank you so much, both of you. I'm going to hand you over to Martin to discuss with Norma and Christian about Library of Ourselves.
Thank you, Richard. And yeah, so Norma and Christian, thank you for joining us today. And yeah, we've just heard from Julia and Tomasello about their project, you know, and but your collective represents a different sort of approach to sort of instead of looking at the individual, it's about embodying something, embodying the whole thing in a slightly different way. So we've talked about this notional sort of concept of this third space in which everybody sort of collaborates, you know, and we have seen in our research how people sort of move in and out of this collaborative space. So how do you think the way that you collaborate as in your collective differs from the previous projects?
Maybe there's two things I want to say, like as a collective. So the collaboration we have in the collective, it's really, yes, we have very different backgrounds. So we all have different nationalities as well, speak different languages, different professional backgrounds. And so we have like developed something, I think that is more akin to code switching. So it's really, through my work with Being at the Lab, I have learned a neuroscientific vocabulary that I didn't have before. And now I'm able to talk to other neuroscientists, also outside of my work with Being at the Lab. And at the same time, I've also, like, as an anthropologist, I mean, I also needed to learn like an artistic vocabulary, for example. So that is an ability I like still learning, you know, but something that I gained through my work with Being at the Lab. And I think the others, like I just talked about this with Marte, another member of the collective, about this yesterday, because he started out with Being at the Lab as an artist, and now he's close to finishing his PhD in psychology. So doing very like, yeah, experimental science really in the lab. So, but there's not so much, I think, and I don't know if this is a failure of our work or if this is something that we still need to develop, or if it's just like, I mean, it's important to acknowledge it, which is that it's not so much a collective practice. So we are not so much, we don't have a dictionary, you know, that we sit together and it's like, okay, let's talk artistic, in artistic manner. Okay, now let's talk scientifically. I wouldn't even know how you would do that. Yeah. So that is one thing. And then the other thing, so I guess we are a third space in that regard. But then the second thing is that in the installation we have, in the machine to be another, where two people are swapping perspectives, embodied perspectives, they also very often describe it as a third space. So they can't say where their own body starts and the other begins, or like, this is also the thing, like you and I, the linguistic reference kind of lose their meaning, because people often say, oh, when I lifted my arm, I mean, you lifted your arm, and then like, who's you, who's I, when we are in this body swapping together. So it's interesting how the artistic practice really determines or shapes the organization of the laboratory itself.
Yeah, sure. And actually, it's really interesting that you say, I mean, we're talking about a third space as this sort of, this imaginary place, but actually you're making it a real space where people are experiencing something else. So what do you think, Christian?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's not so much a third space, as Norma was saying, it's rather an in-between space. And I think there's a lot of ambiguity, there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of different baggage that people come with, that we all come with, that or power structures that exist in these structures. But I think it's a very productive space to be working in. And as Norma said, there's not really, let's say, a synthesis that we've achieved of how to do this as a collective. Since the project is also very modular, and not only do we have different backgrounds, but we end up executing different aspects of the projects in different contexts. So our learnings that we develop and trying to share them internally with the team is also this collaborative process, which is also fraught with ambiguity and tensions of its own. But I think it's part of it. Somehow we've managed to continue the project and keep on expanding for all these years, and it's still going ahead. And I think it gives us all a lot of energy. And the lack of concreteness, let's say, or a synthesis or arriving at a certain point is at least for me, like a motivating aspect of this project. Like there's always stuff to learn. There's always a degree of humility in how you have to approach this, and listening and learning from each context that you are able to share.
And it almost seems like, you know, almost from what you're suggesting, that the team almost sort of mirrors the project itself, you know, and it's really it's really interesting to hear how, you know, artists and anthropologists and things that are collaborating to create this fantastic thing that you've made. So what I'm really interested in, this sort of boundary crossing, these objects that you have to, the way that you collaborate, you know how, you know, say coming back to Norma, you know, you're an anthropologist, you know, and a scientist, and you've crossed over into the world of the arts and humanities almost. And how have you negotiated that? I mean, is that, you know, how have you managed? You know, that's a really interesting thing, I think.
Yeah, it's just by try and error, really. I mean, it really, this is it becomes its own prototyping process, you know, like the way we develop the machine to be another, the way we develop the laboratory around it, like it is this prototyping process that also, yeah, working out what goes well, what feels right and what doesn't. And then very often we also, because we are based in different countries, we have to do the consolidatory work in place. So say at an event, you know, often also high pressure events. So then it is coming together, how do we do this, and we improvise. And that what I had imagined, like when I became a member of the team, is that, okay, we sit together and we discuss, you know, what does it mean? Like, I'm an anthropologist, I have obligations to my graduate program, certain criteria of knowledge production that I have to maintain. And that just didn't happen, you know, like that just didn't happen. There was no, like, we don't have time for this. We have to, you know, do this and that and the other. And it became like a sustained long-term conversation that I, just by the time passing by, I learned how to position myself, really. And I'm still, you know, it's still all moving ground, really.
Okay, so thank you. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to pass you back over to Richard now, so we can have some insight into virophilia.
Thanks, Martin. Okay, so I'm actually going to direct a question initially to Miranda about the project, because to me it highlights the importance of different ways of knowing, of whether one learns about the aspects of a virus through reading or through watching a documentary, or feeling the virus inside the mouth or the esophagus, as happens through the cooking performances that Pei Ying gives. I'm just wondering what impact this project has had, if any, on the ways that you see perhaps public understanding about the virus and about viruses, and different ways of explaining or experiencing the virus and the related conditions from them.
I think so this is really work from Pei, because I was more involved in the Tame to Tame project. But what I see is that it's such a beautiful way to better understand viruses. Of course, I'm in the lab with viruses all day, so I have certain ideas about them and how you behave around viruses. But that's not the case for everyone. For most people, it's something that you are afraid of, and maybe I can tell you a little bit about the technical background. But I think through her work, Pei makes them more visible, as you say, more understandable. And of course, the current situation with the SARS, it's also, people are so much more aware about the viruses around them and how they behave. It's maybe not the food aspect, but in Tame to Tame, Pei developed a dance with how you connect or behave around the virus. And currently, if I'm in the supermarket, I always have the feeling that I do the similar dance. It really sort of gets back again. I'm not sure if more people have that, but yeah, it's a different way of behaving.
Yes, I definitely do the COVID dance every day, I think, in various ways. Pei Ying, if I can turn to you and sort of, I guess just go along the same lines of that question, in terms of the public understanding of the viruses. So I just wonder if you feel there is a greater urgency for projects such as yours for people to not just read about, but actually experience aspects of the virus in the ways that you're doing through the cookbook, particularly.
Well, I think definitely, and especially, well, before COVID-19, well, my experience with the audience of my project, a lot of them were coming without knowing what virus is, and they are always confusing between viruses and bacteria. So by then, my project sort of always have an aspect of educating people what are viruses. But after COVID-19, it changed completely, that people seem to have a lot of fear with viruses. And while then it's nice in a way for me in the project that I'm not seeing viruses in a way that is directly related with sickness. And in that sense, I think it's also better because there are like a lot of viruses in this world. And one of the key points where I started virophilia is that one of the virologists I visited, he mentioned that about 90% of viruses are beneficial for their host. And that's something that we miss all the time. So right now, the whole world is a bit distressed by the virus and one single virus that makes us sick. But then to be fair or to be practical, to consider our relationship with viruses, that we need to think about the others that are beneficial for their host, or they're not related with us, but then maybe related with other species. I think for that, then we can have a better understanding of the world simply. It doesn't, like, we don't really have to implement it in a certain way, but we need different light towards these things. And I think that will also help emotionally for people who are really having a hard time facing this pandemic. And I think that's also what art can do, because in art, we have the freedom to imagine and we have the freedom to experience things in different ways. We also have the freedom to experience things just with speculation and not really physical encountering them. So that's why I find very crucial for other people to join and to create different images about viruses.
And thank you for that. And just to briefly follow up, we've talked before about this idea of the third space, separate to your own disciplines. Did you find yourself forging an area where you perhaps developed a different kind of language or way of operating, or did you feel that didn't particularly happen?
I guess in my case, it sort of has, but then also because I had a biological background, so my language, when I'm facing scientists, I'm already putting myself like halfway. Like I would definitely communicating in a different language with people who are from art or who are visiting the exhibition. But I guess also on Miranda's side, I guess by time we gain a bit of trust to each other, and then we know when we can sort of go free on our imaginations and just to speculate strange questions. Like, for example, I was asking Miranda the other time, like, where can I go hunt for viruses that I can get most varieties, which you don't really like bump into a virologist and then you ask that question, because she knows that what I mean and what I'm gonna do with it. So I'm not gonna mess around like media and trying to make it sound horrible, but rather to make it more friendly. So I guess we do have that third space, which is built on trust. And then the language itself does more of a bit, but maybe Miranda has something even more, because I think I have a bit of mixed background. So
yeah, I think for me it was really because the way we started was that you came with me in the lab, and I tried to give my scientific explanation, and you observed and told what you observed, which was I think on a different level, more as an artist. And I think the space where we found each other is like, my research has much more boundaries because I have the ethical concerns. My conclusions has to be supported by the data. You know, I'm trying to find what is true, and I have to express what the caveats are. And art is with less boundaries. And for me, that was really something I had to grow into, that not everything has to be precise and correct, but there's also space for pondering what could happen.
I also want to add one thing, like Miranda mentioned the ethics. And for me, the ethics is also important in the sense that I think a lot of time I spend quite a while to trying to listen to Miranda and what are the ethical concerns and how can I transform it into the art space, because we are dealing with something that can cost people life. So if we want to be free in the art, it's still important that to know what are the dangers and to consider it before it's being implemented. And that's, I think, another thing that sort of doesn't go directly around the project, but it's always comes even before the project is in a form. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think we'll direct your questions there. Thanks, Pei Ying and Miranda. Now, I think Martin and I have asked enough questions for now, so we've got a very brief amount of time. If anyone else wants to pose a question or a prompt to anyone else. Norma's hand was raised. Go ahead, Norma.
Yeah, cheers. Now, I was wondering, with Alma, I was wondering, the way I understood it is basically you put a sensor in panties. So I was wondering, like, in terms of like the ethics of knowledge production, right? Like what are your thoughts about like how you deal with the data and what you will use with the data? You know, like kind of what happens below or beyond the user's immediate perception in that regard. And then the second thing I was wondering is also, do you have a concrete like framework for your project? Would you say like, okay, this is product design, for example, this is product development, and it just like is maybe a more like democratic form of product development, like you're outside of, you're not part of like a great company or something? Or would you frame it more as like an art project and a speculative design project?
Okay, Tommy, I start, and then you go with the data. Maybe I go with the second question. So Alma came really as a response from like I feel very close to Pei because I was working as well with bacteria with Future Flora, and somehow as well my relationship was very kind of a symbiosis. So I was really growing them in my room and taking care of them, beside how much I also knew that I had to be careful because, of course, not having a scientific background, I didn't really know what was growing on, but I really felt that it was like a living relationship with a living organism. And so when I did Future Flora, it was really like I try to like show that it can be real, but as it was perceived immediately, it was really like, okay, it can never happen. And why as a female I should put bacteria in my underwear? Like, it doesn't make sense. It should be wrong. Like, we should, like, bacteria, we should swipe them out. Like, we always have this perception that bacteria are bad, especially now with this time of virus. Like, it's very difficult to understand what is the boundary, even though when you think that actually we are made also in our skin microbiome of bacteria, then you come back and think, oh, actually, this is why I have to keep always my flora in balance, and I need to actually think also in this different level. And Future Flora had the problem that it was addressed for a future where we are aware of this bacteria environment, but we are in a peaceful symbiosis as we usually are with the body, and that we will have one day also an incubator at home to grow bacteria. So why not for female to grow our own healthy vaginal flora? But of course doesn't exist this reality now, but exists the vaginal infection. So I had many females like writing me by email, like, can I be your beta test, where I can buy the kit? I really need it, like it's essential. And so as a designer and as a female, I really like felt the need like to really try to produce something closer to this reality. And since I'm specialized in electronic textiles, and actually Tomas as well is developing, is finishing actually a PhD on as well, like from a material science point of view to like wearable technology, we felt why not that we really try to make a product that can actually respond to this and can give a tool to female to take care of their own body. And so we're trying to move out from the speculative, because actually we're like, our topic is very real. So ethically, I need to be also like, give something now, even though as a designer, I could play speculative forever and I would love it because it's very easy for me. So somehow we are moving towards a product, towards like the market, but yeah, as you can also argue, we are playing also very artistically, because I want to keep this part, because by playing artistically, you can allow the female to accept more technology in the underwear as well. You can really like create a language and a scenario that will let them understand easier that actually technology is not always scary, and it can be implemented even in an intimate area like the vulva. So somehow we are like really like jumping from the scientific to the artistic to the actual like market and product vision to really understand how quicker or not we will arrive probably to have a product.
Norma, that's a very good question about the data privacy. We sort of like spoke a lot internally and tried to speak with others as well. And we basically understand actually what the user needs and what the doctor's needs might be different. We do not want to collect data for the sake of collecting data to create a massive database, kind of like Google style, and then I don't know what we'll do with it. We want to collect data only when it's needed, but we don't believe that all the responsibility of choosing where the data goes can just be a first screen of the app saying, do you want to send your data to the community, to the doctor? It's much more difficult than that, and just simply like, we want to give the user the opportunity to choose, but we need to be an informed choice. There needs to be something where we really explain them where this data goes. What does the doctor really want to know? What does the researcher need to know? So it's something that we take very seriously. We don't have like a one answer for this, but we want to work with the users and the doctors to really only collect the data that is necessary, not any more than that.
Okay, thank you so much, Julia and Tomasello, for answering, and to Norma for that question. I'm so sorry, we'll have to finish there for time, I'm afraid. So thank you so much, all of you, for your presentations and then the ensuing discussion. It's absolutely fascinating to hear the variety of perspectives and ways of working that people have developed here, and how they're continually changing as well. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.